Well, hey there, my name is Ben from Circle Canoe Games. Welcome back to this video where we're going to be talking about game design tip number 6. So, tip number 6 is you need to define the primary conflict for your players. So in the last video, we talked about your game needing a narrative, and you really can't have a narrative if there isn't conflict, right? If everyone is just automatically able to do the things they want to do, well, that's not really a game. So you need to have conflict, right? Something that is blocking players from doing what they're trying to do. And it's important to note that there's really two types of conflict you can have. There's internal conflict, right? Conflict that comes from decision making. Players are thinking internally, well, if I do this, then I won't be able to do that, or they're planning down the line, well, I want to be able to do this, so in order to do that, I need to do this now, right? So there's that like planning, internal decision making, that can be a significant or all of the conflict in your game. Of course, there can be external conflict as well, hopefully not yelling at each other, where the other player has a space on the board that you want or need, okay? That's conflict externally, that's happening out on the board in front of you. And I think the tricky thing with conflict is it's a balancing game. If you don't have enough conflict, well, then the game isn't interesting, right? Everyone is just able to do what they want, or there's not enough decisions, right? Everyone's game ends up looking pretty much the same because there's so few points that they have to make decisions around. On the flip side, though, if everything is conflict, right? If everything is in the way, it becomes laborious, right? You're trying to think about too many angles, and it feels like maybe there isn't even a right move to make. So what we're wanting to do is find that sweet spot that's in between not having enough conflict and having too much conflict. So one thing to be clear, in many games, the conflict is the other players, right? If it weren't for other players playing their game, you would be able to play your game relatively easily. You think of games that are basically area control, Small World, Risk, Kingdom Builders, all of these area control or where you're trying to do various things on a map and other players can take regions. That means the other player is the conflict. They're the ones that are doing things that are messing up your plans. And that is true for a lot of games. It's the other players that are the conflict. But that's not always true, and it's not the only source of conflict in those games. For instance, in Small World, right, there's the conflict of how your powers match up against other powers and how where you are on the map is giving you extra bonus points and things like that. So there's that conflict of internal decision-making of what is your strategy. In a game like Pandemic or a lot of cooperative games, the game itself is providing the conflict, right? The game is playing against you. It's adding in hurdles that you are trying to overcome as a group. I just played Okie Dokie recently, and in that game, the conflict really is limited information, right? That there are things you don't know that you're trying to figure out without being able to just tell each other, which is a challenge. And there's many, especially cooperative type games that are like that. Of course, there's social deduction games. The conflict is, again, that hidden information, that piece where you don't know, and there's little bits of clues that you're trying to figure out, and you are making your best judgment call with available information. That would be the conflict, because you really can't be sure for most of the game of what you're thinking is right. In a game like Carcassonne, part of the conflict is the random tile draw, right? That there would be this perfect tile that if I just got it, I would complete the city and I would get 1 billion points and I would overtake someone else's city in the same move or something like that. And that's just not always going to happen because you can't control what tiles you draw. And so kind of that lack of control element or a random element can be a part of the conflict in a final game. And I think there's lots more examples of things that you could pinpoint as points of conflict in a game that are sort of interrupting that nice narrative flow of just saying, well, I begin the game and then I'm in the middle and then I complete the game. Those points of conflict are the things that make you stop and change strategies or butt up against another player or a whole manner of other things. So in your game, you need to think about right now, what are my primary points of conflict? I think it's really good to go through that and say, is that what I want it to be, first of all? And can I lean into that a little bit more? Can I optimize that so it's really clear what players are trying to overcome? I think, again, of games that I've tried to design in the past, where there were so many things that were potential barriers that it was really unclear if there was good decisions to make. And then likewise, I know I've designed games that really had very little conflict, or the only conflict was really a random element. And that in turn gives a feeling of very little control, which just isn't a very satisfying game. So if either one of those describe you, you should probably go back to the drawing board, identify those points of conflict and say, which ones do I need to lean into and increase a little bit? Which ones do I need to dial back and decrease, or even remove completely from the game in order to make this narrative journey as interesting as possible? So again, what are the points of conflict in your game? And is that helping the overall narrative? And if you find this video helpful and you want to see more of this type of content, I'd really appreciate a like on this video, subscribe to the channel. I love making these. I love helping out newer game designers, figuring out how to design games from scratch that they love. I'll see you in the next video.